Christina.
Hello, Wynne. Hello, Vicki.
It's
Hi.
so good to see you. I usually get to see you in person, so this is a change to see you over Zoom. But it's so nice to have you meet Vicki and to have you on the podcast. Um, what a
Thank
pleasure.
you for having me.
Mm, we're
So
thrilled.
we love your book, Pride and Preston Lin,
Yay.
and agree with all your great reviews. And I want to just pull there's Vicki.
I love it. I'm keeping it close. I love it. Yes.
Oh,
I have to admit, I hid from my kids for an hour so that I could finish the book. I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
kids, whatever you want to do, I don't care. I've got a book to finish.
Oh, oh.
oh, that's like music to a writer's ears.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the one that's death is, oh, it took me forever to finish this. I kept
Oh,
putting it down and I never wanted to pick. Nobody ever wants to hear that. So, Wynne, thank
Yeah,
you.
you're you're welcome.
no, no, it was so good and so chock full of just rich characters and humor and life. Just so full.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Okay, I want to read this one
Yeah.
review, and it comes from Publisher Weekly.
Hmm.
In a world with so many Pride and Prejudice adaptations, a new one has to be truly special to stand out. And this one is. Dudley's contemporary debut is faithful to its source material, but finds clever ways to make it work in a modern setting,
Hmm.
while also adding an authentic Chinese American perspective on the beloved story. A warm, sweet story with all the witticisms Austen fans savor. So I think, and I couldn't agree with that more.
Yep.
But we want to know how you came to write this Asian American Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because so I'm old, I'll just say. And when I was growing up, uh, me and my sister were super readers. And so when I was in my early teens, I went through a reading classics and reading romance phase.
Mm.
And, Jane Austen is the perfect crossover author for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And, this is the day, it never even occurred to me that, nowadays people are like, why? Why is everybody white? Why is everybody XYZ? Right. And
Mm.
it never occurred to me that why are there no Chinese characters in these books I
Mm.
read? Because
Hmm.
there weren't any, frankly. And so it
Right.
just never occurred to me. I read Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read
Mm.
Trixie Belden. I read Nancy Drew. I read all the classic girl books growing up.
Hmm.
And I was just fine. Loved them. I still love them. They're wonderful books. And so it really wasn't until I went to college and I was assigned Maxine Hong Kingston's The Woman Warrior, the first book I'd ever read
Mm.
by a Chinese American. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know this could be a thing, right?
Oh.
And then you look at how much the landscape has shifted since then.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Now you have to apologize if, if in your book you don't have some sort of diversity and some represent it has changed so much. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what it did is, so I got to thinking, right? I was like, oh, well, gosh, here's this book I've always loved. Here's this genre I've always loved. I love
Yeah.
love stories in books. It doesn't have to be a romance, but I love love stories in books. It's always my favorite part. So, I was just like, oh my gosh, the story, the Pride and Prejudice story translates so well to so many different situations and
Mm-hmm.
cultures. And it translates particularly well, I think, to a Chinese American culture because um, it's a very competitive culture in
Mm.
ways, and there are definite things that are looked up to and things that are not looked up to, right? And
Mm.
and there's definite class levels, and so but they're different,
Hmm.
so right? I was saying that Preston Lynn ends up being kind of a Chinese mom's dream, right? He's got the
Yes.
big name college, right?
Hmm.
He's got the athletics, and that's lovely because it makes him good looking. But really, he's got the Stanford name behind him, and he's got a wealthy family, right? So he's
Hmm.
kind of he's obviously the Darcy character because he has these things, whereas poor Lissy doesn't have the money. Lissy doesn't have the fancy school, right? Lissy is still struggling to graduate, whereas he's on his PhD, right? So it was just so easy to kind of enter into this and sort of play around with it because they're very real. They are very real prejudices within the community.
Yeah.
And I catch myself in them. Sometimes I one time the first time when I went back to work and I was working at some health food smoothie place, right? I was just like, I need to have a job for the first time since I had kids. And there was a young uh Asian guy working there. And I caught myself in the thought, your poor mother.
Oh,
You know,
Right.
what
Yeah.
are you doing working at the smoothie place, right?
Yes. Yeah.
She must be tearing her hair out. So, and a friend actually said, "Oh my gosh, that is so Chinese of you." I was like, "Oh, you're right." And so I found that these sort of cultural prejudices just kind of become they're in there,
Yeah.
and so it was
Yeah.
really easy to just
Oh
let
my
them out.
gosh.
To, to,
But I love that you do that so often
Mhm.
throughout the book with like love and humor.
Yeah, yeah,
It's never done in a way where there's an edge or it's divisive. It's just real and it's family and
yeah,
you're
yeah.
such a storyteller in I told Wynne this yesterday. Your dialogue is so sharp.
Oh,
And so compelling, but
Yeah.
there's that banter that goes on that's playful. It's
Mm-hmm.
playful and it might be a little bit edgy, but it's also real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I
so good.
I I have this one particular piece of dialogue, sort of,
Yes.
that I love, and it was he didn't say anything. She said nothing right back. And I love that. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
really dialogue, but it's that interplay, and you just do it brilliantly.
yeah. It's like there's
So
still a
good.
power struggle,
Yeah.
being the first one to talk is a power struggle. And,
Yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
and,
right.
that was, there are certain sort of touchstones in Pride and Prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
which I wanted to make sure I hit.
Hmm.
And, at the Netherfield Ball, that is one of them, right?
Oh yeah.
When it's like, is this guy really going to go a half hour saying nothing? I
Hmm.
am going to make him talk, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm not going to let him sort of loom over me like this. I'm going to
Right.
make that guy talk. So,
Yeah.
so I wanted to be sure to hit on those sorts of moments,
Yes.
those power struggles between them. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
you did it so brilliantly.
So well. And I
Mm.
told Wynn when we were, we were like giddy with excitement yesterday thinking about talking with you today and just the treatment of the ball and the
Hmm.
refined country dancing and all that, how you set that up so that it was still a feature
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
adaptation. Those are difficult things to do
Hmm.
and bring forward
Hmm.
into a modern
yeah.
story, but you did that so beautifully.
Oh,
Just
thank
yeah,
you. I have to
so
tell
good.
you, there is in Seattle, there's a country dance group that
Oh,
I go to, I don't know, like maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They'll have like a beginner's class.
oh,
And so, you know, I love that stuff. And I think everyone who loves Jane Austen movies
yeah.
loves the ball scenes, right? So it's like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, even though this is modern,
Hmm.
it's not a
So
stretch at
good.
all to say all these people are going to want to go, right? They're going to want
Yeah,
to go to this thing and they're going to
yeah,
want to learn the dance and
Hmm.
so yeah, and so
yes,
I could use a lot of my experience trying to learn these steps that they were trained in, raised in with a dancing master and you learn and everybody knows the
yeah.
patterns and to just dork around as
Hmm.
beginners and
Hmm.
just have fun with that. So,
Yeah, but it's a
Right.
great way to express tension between
yeah.
characters. Also,
Hmm.
Yeah,
kind of the
yeah.
coming together, the pulling
Yes.
apart. I loved all of that.
Yeah. So
Oh.
this is you've published 14 books.
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Um, I don't know. Probably, yeah, like a bunch of Regencies and then my unpublishables. I didn't even count my unpublishables.
What?
We'll have to
What?
talk about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we will
Yeah.
have to talk about that. But
Hmm.
what fuels your creative spark?
Um, it's funny because I remember in my teenage years, a friend and I, we would collaboratively write these
Hmm.
jokey, crazy stories. We would just pass them back and forth and write. And I remember one English teacher loved them, and another one told us, I think you would write better separately, right?
Oh,
We're like, we don't
oh,
like that teacher,
oh
right?
no.
But then really, I didn't. I mean, I've always been a reader, but I didn't
Hmm.
really start writing um, till my kids went to elementary school. And
Hmm.
then um, I was like, oh, I would like to explore this. And so um, and then it just became something, it's like, I actually really love this. I
Hmm.
love telling stories. A few people seem to enjoy reading them. So, you know,
Hmm.
um, and I
Hmm.
told my husband, I said, you know, some wives buy shoes, right? That's their hobby. I was
Yeah,
like, this at least, if I can not lose money, can
right.
this be my hobby? And he said, yeah, go ahead. This can be your hobby. So, and it was only really in the past 3 or 4 years that I finally said, oh, you know what? What if I tried to do this as a business and
Hmm.
actually
Yeah.
reach beyond my
Hmm.
friends and family and try to actually be a little more commercial? So that's
Hmm.
kind of been my arc. So I'd
Hmm.
really say it's October 21 was probably,
Hmm.
I started writing again during COVID after taking 6 years off. When my kids were
Oh, wow.
teenagers, I had no bandwidth for anything, no nothing creative anywhere in
Right,
my
right.
life. And it was just survival mode. So then after
Hmm.
that passed and then COVID happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I would like to explore this again. And I have just
Yeah.
been having a great time. So,
Oh
Hmm.
gosh, I love
And
that.
and when you made that transition to try to do it more as a business, I'm
mhm.
like, what were the things that you've tried to push past
um,
that friends and family boundary?
well, it's interesting because, this is probably one of the best and worst times to be a writer trying to
Mm,
make money off of it.
mm,
And I would say it's one of the best times because you can do it yourself and you
mhm,
can you can do all the steps yourself and produce a book yourself and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually not too expensive and um, kind of depending. And but it's also most difficult because the barrier to entry is lower. And so the market is flooded.
mhm,
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like trying to find out, it always is going to take effort and it takes a big dash of luck to be
mhm,
found. And it
Yeah.
just happened to be, I would say the luck part with me was that I had been writing my unpublishable books and then, started writing some
mm,
Regency romances. And so I just had the good fortune when I decided I was going to try to make a business out of this, that I had a little series of Regency
mm,
romances. So I
mm,
didn't just have one book, I had a
Yeah.
little interconnected series. And so that was key um because then, you could immediately I could say, "Hey, if I can get anyone to look at book 1, then
Hmm.
they led sort of automatically to the
mm,
next book." So I
mhm,
would say that was kind of the big
mhm,
break. Romance is very popular, period, right? It really supports the whole publishing industry, but it's
Wow.
also very popular in the program Kindle Unlimited, right? For
mhm,
people who they're like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to buy paperbacks and that sort of thing. I just need to read 100 books a month because that's what I do. So that's very
Hmm.
popular with romance readers. And
mhm,
so the luck part was having a little series of books, putting it in Kindle Unlimited and finding readers because they binge. And
mhm,
so
Hmm.
that was kind of the thing. So
mm,
if you gals do memoir is a little trickier, right?
mhm.
Because um, some people write multiple memoirs, but it's often not the case, right? You
Right, right.
you
Hmm.
you boom, you tell your big story, and everybody's
Right.
like, "I love this big story, and will I ever hear from this person again?" Right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Yeah.
some writers have made the transition. You think of the Eat, Pray, Love gal, right? She
Mhm.
started out with this memoir type
Right.
book, and then started writing
Right.
novels and that sort of thing. Um, but it's not as clear cut the path.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
But so
Mhm.
that's what I mean about the
Right.
luck part,
Right.
that I
And
Mm.
happen
you
to choose a genre.
And we've
Hmm.
talked about the unpublishables before
Yeah,
we started recording, and you sort of said that you learned some lessons about what.
I did. The first books I ever wrote, it was a series of two novels, and they were meant to be inspirational fiction. Um, some call it Christian fiction, some call it inspirational, whatever. That's what it was meant to be. It's a widow gal, and it's her second chance at love, right? And she happens to mentor this kind of rough kid. And at our church, we have a high school of kids who can be a little rough at times. And
Hmm.
and so I was kind of loosely based on some kids I'd met. And so, long story short, in the book, there was a great deal of cussing. There's actually less. I've edited it to reduce the cussing since I first wrote it. Um, and there's drinking and there's adult situations. And I just had no clue that those things are not allowed in Christian fiction,
Yeah.
inspirational fiction. And so if you go and you look at the reviews, you'll see some outrage. You'll see some, I can't believe that this book has this. So that's what I mean about
Mm,
unpublishable. I just did not know, or I don't know. I I thought the truth of my characters.
yeah.
They need to say all these F
Right,
words,
right.
right? And fine, they say all the F words, but don't expect to sell that book to that genre. So these are
Yeah.
things
Now,
I
is there
learned.
a way
Yeah.
that people learn about these expectations, or is it
Right.
only trial and error?
Yeah, right. Like, where is the
Yeah,
cheat sheet to say, don't
right.
go
I,
here,
okay,
right?
I
Yeah.
know the cheat sheet now because
Yeah.
they'll tell you, they'll say, before you put anything of your own out there, read the top sellers in the genre. So
Mm,
Ah,
the step
right.
I skipped was I should have sat there with some Christian fiction and realized,
mm.
Hmm.
uh-oh, nobody's saying any F words, right? And nobody's
What does
whipping
that
up these
mean?
cocktails. Yes.
Right.
And if I had, I would have saved myself some pain. But,
Yeah.
I told the
Yeah,
story I wanted to tell, but
right.
then I
Well,
had to start over.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but that's also that's still reverse engineering it. I mean, that
Yes.
isn't a very
Yes,
clear-cut way to figuring it out. I mean,
it's true.
you don't
It's
Right.
know
true.
whether they're not in there because people don't know them, or
Yeah.
Right. Right, right. And we've heard that before
right.
from
Mm,
other writers. And sometimes
mm,
that idea, when you feel inspired to write, to go
mhm,
after, some of the things that are popular in a particular genre. I forget who
mhm,
said this to us when, but it's almost like it could be tainting,
Mhm.
what
mhm,
you want to write and being true
Right.
to
mhm,
the story if you're too
mhm,
influenced. But it's that,
mhm,
again, creativity in the
Mhm.
marketplace,
Mhm.
kind of balance, I
Right.
think, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
absolutely.
authenticity and voice.
Yeah.
I mean, you do
Yeah.
Yeah.
have to have your voice and
Yeah.
honor that. Some of
Yeah.
Yeah.
the other stuff you can edit out, but
Yeah.
if you're faking it, um,
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I actually I don't I don't read Regency romances now. And but my
mm,
reason
Oh,
is more I know the conventions. I don't need to read them for research anymore.
mm,
But
right.
also I tend to have like sticky fingers sometimes. Sometimes you read something
mhm,
somewhere and it sparks something,
mhm,
and then I don't want to steal anything from anybody. So
mhm,
I
Yeah.
tend to read all over the place. And if I
Mm-hmm.
see something really inspiring, I'll write it down. And
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
for example, this is an example I often gave, even though I haven't done a thing with it. So if you want to use it, you go right ahead. Um, I was reading this book, and it was about Gutenberg Bibles. It was nonfiction about
Mm-hmm.
these Gutenberg Bibles and who was buying them and what happened to them, traces the history. Anyhow, this one rich guy, I forgot where he lived, it might have been Chicago. This one rich guy buys a Gutenberg Bible, and he has the kind of house where he's got a whole staff in the house, and he's got a gal operating the switchboard in his house because he's this
Wow.
level of guy.
Wow.
And but the gal doing the switchboard for a big businessman has this lovely voice, and he fell in love with her from just hearing her voice,
Oh.
connecting his phone calls. And I was like,
Oh.
the weirdest thing ever.
Oh.
I love that. I don't write in that period, but I love
Oh.
that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, little things like that. And so in fact, I wrote a short story recently that was Regency time. So he's in a hunting accident, so he's actually blindfolded, and he falls in love with her basically for her voice and her personality and
Mhm,
that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
the little inspirations. So,
Those are good ones.
Yeah, but you have to think about where do those threads come from?
Hmm.
And you're
yeah, yeah.
so good in your writing. It's got such a nice cadence to it that I
Mm-hmm.
could see people doing that, picking up things just like the example that Wynne shared,
Hmm.
from these like really these zingy short sentences
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
just, they just hit the target so perfectly that I
Yeah.
could see people reading your work and, being inspired either, with the pacing
Oh,
or, yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. It's
Hmm.
okay.
beautiful.
So I will say, I think, okay, and it's interesting because in my historicals, my voice is a little different, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's because, certain things are off limits, Americanisms, modern
Hmm.
words, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things I found really helpful for clarity and kind of punchy writing,
Uh-huh.
oh my gosh, if you read 1930s noir fiction,
Oh,
Hmm.
Raymond Chandler,
yeah.
even Hemingway, um,
Yeah.
Dashiell Hammett, I
Hmm.
love those guys. They write really
Yeah.
punchy
Hmm.
lines
Hmm.
and very funny. I went on a Raymond Chandler binge because when I discovered him, I'd never read him before until like a
Hmm.
couple of years ago. I was like, this man can write. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yes.
I don't write mysteries. I don't even know how people think of mystery plots, but just in terms of just the one-liners
Yeah.
and the really um just dagger to the heart sentences.
Hmm.
Oh, he's
Yeah.
so good at it. It's
Ooh,
amazing.
ooh, it's
Yeah.
so good to hear what is inspiring to you. And
Hmm.
it reminds
Yeah.
Hmm.
me of a professor who used to like just really just harp on the economy of words, right? Just,
Hmm.
Huh.
he was
Yeah.
so good at like
Hmm.
edit, edit, edit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, now we'll start
Right.
Yeah.
talking like 40s gangsters. Yeah.
I know.
See here, right? Yeah, I have to think how to do that. I need a big fedora. Yeah.
Right,
Oh, that's
right.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I found myself feeling incredibly hopeful after reading Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
I think not only because you tell it so well, but also
Yes.
because there's sort of a redemptive theme. And,
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
it's an adaptation, you're sort of following the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
script, but
Yeah.
just the whole idea about repairing our relationships and
Hmm.
mistakes. I mean, it's just such a sweet story that way.
Yeah.
Oh, great. It's important to me. And I love hearing about the sort of theme of your podcast as well,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, I resonate with this, right?
Oh.
I think one of the nicest things I can hear in a review is it was such a kind story,
Mhm,
you know?
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say people can't be vicious and awful. We all know people can, right?
Yeah.
But just I like to have characters who have kind of an arc of their own where they learn
Mhm,
something about
mhm,
themselves, right? Where they can learn if they're not kind, they can learn to be kinder, if
mhm,
um
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of redemption of I don't think anybody's black and white, right? I think
mhm,
we're all kind of complicated people, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing because it means
Mm-hmm.
it means even if you're the villain, right, you are capable of kindness and you're capable of
Yeah.
growth and capable
Yeah.
of grace.
mhm.
Yeah.
And it also means even if you're the good guy, right, you can do some pretty darn awful things and say
Mhm.
some bad things, but don't worry, right? We're
Right.
Yeah.
all human and we're all this kind of mixed bag and we're all trying to make relationships with each other
Mhm,
where it can be so difficult. There are so many barriers of various kinds to people
mhm,
really understanding each other. So,
mhm,
um, it's perfect. If it's perfect for me for writing romance, right? Because there's always barriers between people really understanding each other
mhm,
enough that they can trust someone else with their heart.
mhm,
That
Yeah.
there needs to be kindness there. So my heroes they always have a big streak of kindness, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't write I don't write the icky types who you're like, why does she like this guy? He's kind of abusive,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
If he's
Right.
kind of abusive, he's got to change, right? So,
Right.
Right,
Well,
right,
and
right.
I think when Wynne was talking about like the kindness and
Mhm,
the redemptive qualities and the
mhm,
forgiveness, one of the things I was thinking about is, being true, to
mhm,
Austen and the
mhm,
time period
mhm,
and honoring, there, I don't want to give away too much because we want everyone, to buy the book and read it.
mhm,
But, people are often misunderstood, and there are
Mm-hmm.
layers, and there are things that we
Mm-hmm.
see, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's everything underneath, that we
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
we tend, especially right now, I would say, we
Mm-hmm.
tend to
Mm-hmm.
react to what we see, and
Mm-hmm.
we pull back, and especially out of, a protective veneer. You
Mhm.
want to get defensive, and you start applying a lot of negativity to the other person
Mhm.
who's really just most often, I think, misunderstood. But there's such a beautiful device that you use that's true, to Pride and Prejudice about letter writing and
Mm-hmm.
allowing that communication to slow down and
Mhm.
let me tell you, and I won't say
Mm-hmm.
more, but let me give you a little bit more of my heart. Let me tell
Mhm.
you a little bit more. And it's received, but it's not responded to immediately. There's that
Mm-hmm.
let me mull, let me consider, let
Mm-hmm.
me try to understand. And I think, right now, some things are just too fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And could be
Yeah.
remedied if we just, slow the pace down. And
Mm-hmm.
so for
Mhm.
me, that was a message that was really resonant about,
Mm-hmm.
just slow down, say what you need to say. Don't expect an immediate response, but speak your truth and try to be open.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think we've probably all had the experience in life where you say something and it's like, oh, that didn't go well, right? And so
right.
you
Every
want to try
day.
again. Yes, you want
Yeah.
to try again to be like, here's what I meant to say. And
Yeah.
I think we still do sometimes write letters or notes to people, but and there's always the danger that that itself can be misunderstood. But just this we want to make the thoughtful attempt to please. I want to be seen and understood for what I'm
Yes.
actually saying, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's a great reminder to all of us because we do live
Yeah.
in a kind of world of sound bites, and you
Yeah.
get two sentences, and if I don't
Yeah.
like you, I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
My 9-year-old daughter, Miss O, the other day she was saying something and I said, it really helps if you think before you speak. She turned and she looked at me and she said, every time?
Jeez, Mom, you're so demanding, right?
Well,
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would
yeah.
solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, right. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, just
Absolutely.
slowing it down will work too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So
But
you
I love that part.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
it's good. So what are you working on next?
Yeah.
I am back with my Regency, so I
Mm,
actually I'm working on I don't have it because it hasn't been published yet. It's coming out this month, but
mm,
it's called Mrs. Merritt's Remorse. And
mm,
actually,
Ooh.
this is a case where she like Lydia Bennet in Pride and
mm,
Prejudice, she eloped with a guy, right? So she's
mm,
got a bad reputation. It ended very badly, kind of like Lydia's marriage, ended very badly. And so now for a couple of years, she's been sort of carrying around her bad reputation and her
mm,
scandal and her shame. Um, and then she meets somebody new. But of course, he's always had a plan for his life, and it was
mm.
not marrying some scandalous woman. He was going to marry this lovely, innocent child. And so it kind of
Mm.
goes from there. So
Mm,
it's a little journey of self-discovery. And then also, I've been in talks with the same publisher. We would like to do, I've already thought of the title. It's Emma Yen Strikes Again. And it was going to be an Emma
Ooh.
version. And
Ooh.
yes, and
mm,
I wanted to set it in the same universe.
mm,
So it's not a sequel, but it's in the same universe as the
mm,
Pride and Preston Lin characters.
mhm,
So and in fact, one of the characters who I proposed reappearing was poor Hazel Bing, right? The Miss Bingley
Oh,
character. And
yes.
yes, but my publisher said, but I didn't like Hazel Bing. You don't have to like Hazel Bing, right? It's just she would be a connection,
right,
a bridge.
right. And the
So,
arc,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
might
yes,
not like her
yes,
before. What
right,
if?
I
right.
know, and for
What
our
if?
listeners and viewers, Hazel's a little bit of a saucy character. She's
Yes.
edgy despite her shellfish allergy, right? She didn't draw a lot of sympathy. She just didn't. Yeah.
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 Yeah, poor
Yeah.
Miss
Oh,
Bingley. It's same thing in Pride and Prejudice. Poor Miss Bingley does not get a lot of sympathy. But
No.
I think in all the gabillion sequels that have been written, I wonder if I'm sure somebody must have given her a redemptive arc. So you know,
So it doesn't need to be you.
it
Right?
doesn't.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Right.
oh my
Oh my
gosh.
gosh, I love all your inspiration and creativity and all the
Yes.
lessons you've shared with us. So thank you so much for spending the
Thank
time to
you
talk
for
with us.
chatting with me.
Oh my gosh, our pleasure. Thank you.
So good. Bye.